Teams are the future of work. So, what's the future of teams? Hey leader, David Burkus here, organizational psychologist and author of 4 best-selling books on helping leaders and teams do their best work ever. And it's the teams that I really want to focus in on in this episode. I believe the data is in, it's been analyzed, it's been processed, and teams are the future of work. Now, why do I say that? Think about your own life. We're collaborating on teams much more often than we ever were before. I think one of the big drivers of that is the fact that creativity is a team sport. All of the easy problems have been solved. Your job, if you're in a knowledge work industry, your job is to solve problems, generate ideas, create value for the organization. Even if you're in a service-based sector, your job is often to solve problems for the people you serve. And the easy problems have been solved. They've got policy and procedure manuals set. They've got systems in place. It's now the wicked problems that we have to solve, and those are best solved on teams. So teams are the future of work. So it's worth asking, what's the future of teams? What are the trends we can look at that show us where teamwork is headed? And that is what we're going to talk about in this episode. 4 trends shaping the future of teamwork and hence the future of work. So the first trend shaping the future of work is that team culture matters more than company culture. Yeah, team culture is going to matter more for just about every organization than company culture. And this is somewhere we were already sort of headed if you think about it. But this is somewhere where 2 years of the pandemic and our response to the pandemic via remote work really accelerated. I became an organizational psychologist. I started my studying in the era where everyone was looking at companies that were providing all sorts of on-campus perks and benefits. The corporate cults, if you will, who were providing free food and free daycare and free pet care and free dry cleaning and an entire social life with bars and kombucha and all of this stuff readily available for people that we later learned was often just about tricking people into staying, at work all the time. But what we looked at is shaping company culture. We had a great company culture because we had these things on campus. And then what happened? Well, in response to the pandemic, we shifted everyone who could work remotely, and none of those perks mattered anymore, did they? Instead, we got to zoom in on what really mattered and what, even before the pandemic, what really shaped people's engagement or motivation, and that is the team that they were on, and yet the leader of that team as well. The old maxim is really true. People don't quit bad companies, they quit bad bosses or bosses that allow bad team culture, if you will. And this will not change post-pandemic. Even if you're calling everyone back to campus, this won't change. People's experience of work, their motivation to work hard for that organization is shaped by the team that they're on. In fact, it's really just a motivation to work hard for the people that they work with. Team culture matters more than company culture. Trend number 2 is that teamwork stays virtual even if everyone is back in the office. And here's what I mean by that. Obviously, if you are a small business and you have 6 employees and all 6 are coming back to your place of work, okay, collaboration is probably not going to stay virtual. But if you work for a national or a multinational, international, or even just a company with 2 offices, your collaboration is going to stay much more virtual than it was before. It kind of makes perfect sense. We spent 2 years, a large portion of us, 40% of people collaborating virtually with just about everyone in the organization. We took a 10-year leap in our familiarity with virtual collaboration tools, right? Not just video calls, not just Zoom and Teams calls, but also using email better or using email at all, or using project management software or other tools that help us collaborate with each other from afar. And so now just about everybody has at least 2 years of experience in that. Why wouldn't you use that experience to put together the best team possible for a specific project, even if people in that team are in multiple different cities? Just because you're leading a project and you're in the Cincinnati office doesn't mean you wouldn't want to pull people from the Houston office or the Vancouver office or the Singapore office or the Accra or Cape Town office or the Paris or London office or the Reykjavik office, if anyone is there. Apologies to anyone watching in Iceland, by the way. You're going to want the best people for the project, regardless of where they are. And the only way you're going to get that is if you keep collaborating virtually. And that's why I can confidently say that for almost all of us, virtual collaboration is going to continue, even if it's a bunch of people back in the office collaborating virtually. Speaking of projects, that's really the third trend that's shaping the future of teamwork, and that is that teams are going to be organized around projects, not around direct reports, roles and responsibilities, or the org chart. You know, it's still the case, even 2 years post-pandemic, that a lot of people, when you use the term team, are really referring to the 6 to 10 people that report to the same supervisor. And yeah, they're a team in some capacity, but more and more work is shifting to be project-based and not role-based. Hey, we have this new project internally, this internal transformation, or hey, we have this new client who needs to be taken through our process. And as a result, we need to be thinking in projects, not just in the org chart. I mean, the org chart, if you don't know, the org chart was invented to keep roles and responsibilities in the railroad industry. Yeah, the railroad industry, right? The ultimate definition of something that really doesn't change. It takes an awful lot to tear up railroads and move them somewhere else. Now we're changing far more often. It's probably why railroads really can't keep up, except in a few countries. Now we're changing far more often, which means the teams that we're serving are going to change far more often, and they're going to be much more project-based than just position-based, just the people that respond to you. So it pays to expand your thinking here on what makes a team, to not just the people that report to the same boss as me, but your team is really the people who are working on the same project, or you might have multiple teams working on different projects. Those are your teams, not just who your boss is. Speaking about that identity of the team, that's the fourth and final trend shaping the future of teamwork, and that is that teams are going to be more boundaryless than they've been in the past. Now, what do I mean by boundaryless? I mean that as we shift to thinking about projects as the building blocks of teams and not just positions, we're going to be building project teams from people who may not all work for the same company, may not have the same domain at the end of their email address. And so we need to shift our thinking on what makes a team. A team is a group of people working towards that same goal, that same project, some of whom may work for your organization. We've already seen this. You know, increases in outsourcing are not new, but it's been a little bit different over the past 5 or 10 years. We've seen little gig work projects, like Fiverr type projects, turn into whole industries that are doing enterprise level project-based outsourcing. You know, situations where, oh, you need to expand and add 24 developers for an 18-month project, but you don't want to make them all employees. There are firms that can cover you for that now. It's Charles Handy's idea of the Cloverleaf organization finally here. Charles Handy argued for it in the 1980s, so we're 40 years past it, but we're finally here. The technology, or really the technology was here before the pandemic, but now it's definitely here. To make that happen has finally arrived, and so we're going to see it. As more work gets organized by the project, more teams are going to be organized around multiple different organizations, have multiple different bosses. And that means as a leader or an aspiring leader, you're gonna have to think differently about how you lead that team, not just how it's defined, but how you lead that team. Because you don't have the same carrots and sticks incentives, the same responsibilities, the same annual performance review or ongoing feedback system to use for everyone on your team. Some people work for totally different organizations. You're going to have to expand how you influence and lead that team and how you build that team culture. So these 4 trends, this is not an exhaustive list. These are the 4 that are easiest for me to see, but I also think they're the ones that most leaders need to see and make adaptations to their leadership style with. Just as we were talking about in trend 4, you have 2 options to respond to these trends. You can double down on the way you've been leading in the past or the way you've been serving as a team member in the past, or you can embrace these trends and realize you need to shift some things. You need to shift your definition of a team. You need to shift your definition of a team even having to be inside the same organization. You need to reinforce that importance of team culture and not just trust that the company and the people working on company culture are going to be sufficient. You need to lead or be a member of a team differently in the future, and in doing so, you'll set that team up to be able to do their best work ever. Oh, and one more thing, that trust on a team, that sense of psychological safety, it's usually where teams struggle the most. So if that's you, you're gonna wanna check out this video here on how to build trust on a team. I trust you're gonna find a few important hints right there.